Hi, welcome to Seymour's World. I am back. I received so many emails and texts. Where were you the last 2-3 weeks? And are you okay? I'm fine. I was in Europe for 3 weeks with my wife Sue, and we took a hiatus from Seymour's World and from all of my other activities because we needed to. But at the same time, we really got the pulse of what was going on in Europe. And I'm talking about Germany and Austria, France, Switzerland. We were able to talk to people on the street more than talking to politicians, more than talking to journalists, but ordinary people, people who worked in the hotels, in the bars, and in different businesses. We went to Red Bull, one of the largest, biggest businesses in Austria, for instance, in Salzburg, and we looked at what they were doing. So today, instead of me just talking about it, I've invited Jay Fidell. Jay, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I figured that since I haven't been here for 3 weeks, I've probably lost my touch. So I need to get from the expert how to run a show again because it's been that long.
I feel confident you'll have no trouble at all, Seymour.
Well, you know, as we said before the show, we probably need 3 hours.
Yeah.
But let's just get started with what really is happening in Europe. And I want to give our viewers a encapsulation more than a generalization. And I feel that Europe is moving ahead very well economically. What we see in the press is obviously the highlights of anything that's sensational. And some of what is going on is bad. There's no doubt about it. But
You equate sensational with bad.
yes, we
Love
do.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the press, especially CNN, which is what we can see over there, and if you read the International Herald Tribune, and if you read the New York Times edition that's overseas, everything is all about ISIS, about Ebola, about the Euro, about the European Union, and what it stands for. So let me just try to give an overall picture. The European Union is basically an amalgamation of 28 countries. And these countries form approximately 500,000 people. So in essence, the European Union is a market.
It's more than 500,000.
I'm sorry,
500
million people. That's what happens when you get in at 2 a.m. in the morning and then you got to come and rush over to do a show. It's 500 million people. And the 500 million people are absolutely a great market for the American companies, for Chinese companies, and for companies all over the world. But are they fragmented or are they one organization? In many ways, I'm not trying to be a politician, but in many ways they are fragmented. And in many ways they are together and they want to work together. The fragmentation of Europe is due today to certain countries not being able to hold their own, which means they're not paying off their debt to the Union the way others have. Another fragmentation is the cost of European unionism. I know that's probably not a word, but I'm going to use it anyway. The European Union itself has 25,000 employees with a humongous budget of trying to keep the Union together. Does the ordinary man in the street respect what they are doing? The answer is yes and no, because it makes Europe a much easier place to travel in. It's a wonderful place to do business in because you have no duties, no taxes, no border interference, etc. But immigration comes up, and that has become, I think, the #1 issue that we saw in Europe, which means the European Union is accepting people from all over the world. And those people are coming in absolutely without quota. They can come in, become members of the European Union, take advantage of all of the social programs that are in the European Union, and thus become sometimes good for society and sometimes bad for society. So I'm giving you this overall picture of what we have seen in Europe. And Jay, I know you're going to question me and grill me to the point where I have to come down to specifics. But the important thing is to understand there is good and bad.
Where shall I start, Seymour? I'll start at a place that you would hardly expect.
Okay? Go for
it. Driving in this morning on Hawaii Public Radio, National Public Radio, there was a story about a fellow named Jay Gross. Jay Gross comes from California. Now, you know that there are sanctions in place where the Russians, because of the Ukraine controversy, that may be the wrong word, but let's call it a controversy, are embargoing American and European products, including cheese. Jay Gross is an entrepreneur. He goes to a town 20 miles away from Moscow. He buys a cow. He becomes an entrepreneur. He makes cheese. Business is gangbusters because Russia can't import Western European cheeses and American cheeses, either the good ones or the laughing cow, either one. And so, the result is that Jay Gross is cleaning up and very busy.
Little emotion involved with it. They see it as a very temporary issue between the two countries. Russia in itself, and Mr. Putin, in my opinion, is probably one of the most snaky type guys, if I can use that expression. He knows what he's doing. And he knows that the embargoes that are against Russia are probably well balanced with the embargoes that are against the Western nations. But Russia is doing great. They are exporting as much as they can export. They're not being hurt at all. If you notice in the last few weeks, the emphasis is not on the Ukraine anymore. Every now and then the president of the Ukraine speaks up about how Russia's interfering, how the trucks are coming in illegally for aid from Russia, and that they could be harboring Russian activists and maybe arms and all that stuff. The ordinary common man doesn't even think about it, Jay. Not in Europe. The press does, because it's sensational. And, of course, the politicians do, because it's a way to get their voices heard. Russia in itself versus Europe or intra-Europe is as good as it was yesterday as it is today. We do not see any effect in all the countries, and we were in 6 countries. In 3.5 weeks, we did not see an effect of what happened between Russia.
Do you mind if I take issue with some of the things you said?
See, I knew we weren't going to agree on everything.
Right. By the way, I have a shout-out for you. A shout-out to Pauline Labrie. Pauline Labrie is a friend of ThinkTech for at least 10 years. Pauline Labrie comes to our events. She's a retired federal worker. And Pauline sent me a note after our last show, which just comes to mind. And she complimented you and me on our incredible inability to let the other guy talk.
Okay, I get the point.
Thank you, Pauline.
My lips are sealed.
No,
Go ahead.
I think she really means it, and I think it's true. Let me just say that we have a correspondent in Brussels, and I asked her how the European, and she's a think tank kind of person. She's responsible for Asian affairs, looking at Asian affairs from the point of view of ThinkTech. Of this think tank, which is in Spain and in Brussels. It's a 2-city thing. And I asked her, how people were feeling about, at least the people she dealt with, were feeling about Ukraine. And she said there was concern in Europe about it because it removed the buffer between NATO and Russia. And what Putin does makes them nervous. And they all agree, and I think the press agrees, that this is part of a long plan. That Putin's long plan is not yet, played out. There'll be more to come, and it is, at least diplomatically, it is of some concern. The other thing is, I heard not too long ago that in fact the economy of Russia has suffered by some substantial, noticeable amount because of the sanctions. Now, maybe it's not as bad as you said, the press makes it out to be. Maybe when you look, at the walking down the street kind of view of things, You don't see that, and in fact, maybe the economy is just fine,
Well,
not being affected.
let me answer that, because we did see in every city that we were in, it's very easy to look at who is walking down the street, especially in cities like Amsterdam and Salzburg and Vienna, for instance. And there are an amazing amount of Russians, an amazing amount of Russian tourism that's coming across the borders to spend money in Europe. And I think that has a great effect on the retail merchants, for instance, on the hotel and tourism industry, because they are big spenders. They may not, let me put it this way, they lack the finesse of a Western tourist or a European tourist because they're quite brash and they are different than most others, but their money is good. And we saw a lot of them, an amazing amount of them. So again, from the guy on the street, you're not seeing anything against Russia. There may be a fear, as you say, but nothing in the day-to-day affairs that says we don't want any Russians here. They're discussing immigration a lot more than they are Russia and its effect.
I think you're pointing out a very important point, and that is Western Europeans are tolerant. You know, they've learned to tolerate the others of the 28 countries you mentioned. They've learned to tolerate all the immigrants. I mean, to a certain degree. I think now they're, having a little trouble with that, but they're basically tolerant, and they're tolerant of the Russians. The Russians have made investments,
Correct.
all over Western Europe. What's that cruise line that goes on the river? I want to say
Viking.
Viking. It's a Russian company.
That's correct.
And you brought one of those guys
from
St. Petersburg.
Correct.
You brought him here, and he was involved in that as a travel agent, among other things.
He's actually now even more than that. He's working in the tourist board in St. Petersburg.
Anyway, so the other thing is I saw on PBS a week or two ago a very interesting piece about Russian spying in the UK. There has never, and referring back to the days of James Bond, comparing those days, post-war days, with what's going on now, this piece, and I take it was a pretty good documentary, stands for the proposition that there are many, many, many more spies from Russia in the UK now than there ever were. And it runs back to that fellow who was poisoned with radioactive poison.
Oh my gosh, yes. I can't remember his name.
But it was radioactive poison,
Yeah.
and it was a slow death. And, generally ascribed to Mr. Putin as part of his thing about counterintelligence. But there's an active intelligence, I don't want to say war, but an engagement going on between the UK and Russia. So yes, there are a lot of Russians. There's a lot of interchange, a lot of engagement, if you will, between Russia and Western Europe. Not all of it is good.
Well, it's there. Let's talk about the UK and Scotland for a minute, because this is, I would say, the number 2 or the number 3 issue. Definitely the number 1 issue in the UK. As you know, politicians are running up to Scotland saying, "We love you, please stay," that kind of stuff. And of course, there are some activists in Scotland who say, no, absolutely not. On a personal level, I'm very familiar with it because I come from Canada, and we had the Canadian-Quebec situation in the 80s and the 90s, and as recently as a couple of years ago, where secession was thought of as being the right way to go. It is a very big issue, tremendous issue. The UK stock market, as you know, has dropped dramatically. Things are going to be happening very quickly if Scotland secedes. My thought, and I hate going out on a limb because those of you who write these things down and get back to me, is they will not secede. I don't think it's going to win. It's touch and go as we speak today, but I don't think Scotland will secede from the UK. That's my personal opinion.
It's an interesting kind of experience for people to have. Take sides, and I mean, I would have predicted this, a month or two ago. It was all very cerebral, but it got to be very emotional in the last couple of weeks. And now, there are demonstrations, parades, and people, inside families arguing with each other. And I agree with you. I mean, if they're rational, let's stay with the UK. And if the UK is rational, the UK will do whatever it needs to do to make friends on an ongoing basis.
Now you have the answer to it. I believe there's a certain group of people in Scotland that are not looking to secede, but to try to get more from the UK, especially on the oil, that they have, the energy rights that Scotland has. So there's quite a few issues in politics that are related to money that I think will make this go away, and I think the UK and Scotland will stay together.
Knock wood, Seymour, because my view, and I would vote against the proposition, I would vote for togetherness. My view is this is the wrong time for Scotland to go on its own. They don't realize how much risk they're going to have and how little benefit they're going to have by shoving off from the UK.
I agree.
Yeah, the other thing I want to mention is that, that Scotland has a long history with Hawaii. All those guys that came out here in the Theo Davies Company, which was organized by Scotsmen. Davies was a Scotsman. The Hong Kong Land Company, Jardine Matheson, all those guys were Scots. And they were here, and I met them years ago. They were my clients, and they were redheaded and freckle-faced. One of them, his name was John Lang, became the Taipan. His proving ground, his training ground was right here with Inter-Island Equipment, which was a subsidiary of Davies. And he went to Hong Kong, and next time you knew it, he was the Taipan.
Wow.
So we have a long historic relationship with Scotland. They have done wonderful things in Asia and through Hawaii.
Well, we will get into a little bit more about it after the break. We're going to take a 5-minute break, or a couple of minute break, but I did want to tell you that Jay and I actually agreed on something. We both agreed that Scotland is not going to secede from the UK. Now, of course, it'll probably turn out that they will, and both of us will have eggs on our faces, but who knows? We're going to take a short break. My name is Seymour Kazimirski. This is Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on the ThinkTech Digital Series. The show is every Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and I want you to watch this show because I think that when we talk with artists on the show about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, why they do it, I believe that it resonates within each of us, and we find something inside of ourselves that brings us closer to all of humanity. That's what arts are there to do, and that's what I'm here to do on this show. That's Center Stage. It's on every Wednesday from 2 to 3 o'clock. I hope to see you there.
Hi, welcome back to Seymour's World. I'm Seymour Kazimirski, and I am with Jay Fidell of ThinkTech Hawaii. I don't know if I'm his guest. He's my guest. I just got in from Vienna, Austria at 2 o'clock. Oh, thank you.
I'll be whatever you want, but
thank you.
Right now, today, I'm your foil.
I got in at 2 o'clock this morning and had to get ready for the show, and thank heaven Jay is here to make sure that I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. So, Jay, we talked a little bit about the European Union. We talked about Scotland and what's going on in the UK. Now let's talk about the number one hot button issue, and that is immigration. And this has to relate to us here in the United States as well, because we know we are fighting immigration in many different ways here. Do we want people to come in? Do we allow them, if they are here already, to integrate into our society? Well, let me give you a little bit about what's happening in Europe. It has become, in most cases, a calamity. Probably the biggest negative issue when you talk to people on the street. And what it is, people are coming from all sorts of different countries. It's not just people coming who are Muslims. It's people from Africa that are coming, from every country in Africa, looking to Italy, to Spain, to Switzerland, to England, every country in the European Union, because that's where the money is. That's where they can make a living. And the European Union has a no-holds-barred policy. Anybody can come in and take advantage of the social structure, including free education and free medical care. I'll give you a perfect example. In Austria, we were just talking a couple of days ago, we were in Vienna, and we were speaking to somebody who's got a business, and he was telling me he's very upset that the universities in Austria don't have enough places for Austrians. Why? Because all of the people that are coming from other countries than Austria are getting in. They get free education for 4 years, and they leave. So they have no responsibility to the country whatsoever. That's one of the biggest issues in the industrial marketplace. The other big issue in immigration is what happens in a relatively small community. In Birmingham, England, I had opened up a factory there about 5-6 years ago. And I was shocked that there were so many people on the street that were not from England. They were from India, from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, from all areas of northern Africa. And my wife and I noted that it was not comfortable, that they hadn't integrated at all within the UK community. And they had set up individual areas in Birmingham that were basically surrounded with their own kind, and that's not right. That lack of integration has become the number one hot issue. So, Jay, I'm opening it up to you. What do you think?
Oh, you're right. It's a huge issue, and it's very interesting to compare what's happened there. They're more liberal than we are. They open the borders. They allow people to come in and have the benefits, all those social benefits. And a certain amount of resistance. I don't know if you've seen this movie. If you haven't, you should. It's with Helen Mirren, and it's called The Journey of 100 Feet. It's about it's France, and it's about a 3-star becoming a 4-star restaurant on one side of a country lane, on the other side a brand new Indian restaurant, and how they engage between the two of them. It's very interesting, and it's a microcosm of this whole affair, because it changes the economy, changes the social structure, leads to intermarriage, leads to a complete change in this little town where this happened, which I think it must be at least semi-true. Anyway,
it is a great movie, by the way.
Oh, you saw it? Okay, excellent.
Great.
But I think there's a problem here economically, because it is a burden on the economic structure. It is a burden on the social structure. I'm reminded of these recent incidents in the paper. For example, there are a number of young people who are militants, Muslims who live in England and in Europe, who are going back to ISIS, who are being recruited. They're vulnerable, and they're going right back, and they're becoming part of a 32,000 member force now, jihad force. This is not a good thing. This is not the kind of guy you want for a stable society if he's going to go back and forth and do terrorism. The same thing is recently in France and also in Brussels. There were examples of open violence, including murder.
And anti-Semitism.
In anti-Semitism by these Muslim activists who don't mind shooting up a Jewish museum or a synagogue, killing people on the street completely, on the basis of hate crimes. So you let the borders open. This comes in. You have controversy. You have a polarization. There's a lot of people in France and Germany don't like that. You were telling me there was a protest against anti-Semitism just yesterday, is it?
In Berlin.
In Berlin.
100,000 people, including Merkel, who came and spoke to them and said that we cannot allow anti-Semitism to survive, which means we are going to put it down, basically.
Yeah, and good for her, because that's what you've got to do. But the anti-Semitism that you're talking about in Berlin and in France isn't, maybe to some extent there's some tolerance for it by local people, but it's mostly Muslims who have been allowed to cross the border, and they're very active and militant, and they're playing out their anti-Semitism in the host country. And I think that's what that rally was in Berlin. It's not that there are, German anti-Semites, although there must be some. It's that there are people in Germany who have carried their anti-Semitism into Germany. This is a problem, that Europe doesn't want to have.
But the issue becomes, and yes, anti-Semitism is a big issue for you and I, obviously, and for people in general, because you don't want that to start. If it starts with a hatred of Jews, then it's going to be a hatred of others as well. And then they say that the population in 2020 in France alone will be almost 30% Muslim. So what's going to happen in 2030 and 2040?
This is not without political implication.
Correct.
I remember reading that in 2050, at the rate of fertility, because the average Muslim family has an enormous number of children, much more than a European. The bell curve in Europe is like that. They're not having that many children. But the immigrants come and they have huge multiples of the European bell curve, the European fertility rate. And the projection was by the year 2050, there would be so many Muslims in Germany, that it would be the party in charge. It would have the majority vote of the plebiscite vote in the country.
Jay, you're already seeing it. You're already seeing it because the existing politicians have to pander to this group of people.
Right.
So you're already seeing laws, for instance, that are absolutely impossible for us to recognize as the right way to do business that are being passed. For instance, they cannot have anything that will embarrass a Muslim in school. They can't do anything that will offend them in any which way. And I'm offended almost, here we believe in democracy, and freedom of speech is such an important part of what we have in America that makes us great, absolutely great. But in Europe, it's becoming to the point, especially in the UK, where laws are being passed to give these people a little bit more than the rest of the people, and that's wrong. I think that is the beginning of a very, very bad system of government, where certain people are given special treatment because of their religion. I don't believe that that's correct. I believe people should be able to stand on their own, integrate into a society, and become part of exactly what the UK stands for, or France stands for, or Switzerland, etc.
Now, what's interesting is that, the forces are the same forces that we have. For example, Latinos coming across the border, and the same thing here, people coming across the southern border. But the way that Europe has treated this is so different, and the result is, I suppose, different also. I mean, think about the political implications of an immigration policy here. President Obama doesn't want to touch it until after the elections. It's too hot to handle. We like to enforce the borders. They don't. It's so interesting. Last time I was crossing from France to Germany, I couldn't tell where the border was. I had no idea where the Rhine River was.
The Rhine is, the middle of the Rhine is the border between Russia,
so you only know that
Germany
because somebody
France.
told you. There's no sign.
Nothing.
There's no guardhouse and nothing. So, I mean, you have to give credit to the Europeans for allowing this to happen. But you wonder when they're going to reach the point where they have to start protecting, this very system that gave rise to this kind of liberal thinking.
We have to also realize that the European Union is very young, and they're going to make mistakes just like any child is going to make a mistake. The question is, how expensive is that mistake going to be? Immigration being the number one issue is going to be something they're going to have to tackle very, very soon. I don't know if they will start having quota systems for the European Union against countries coming in.
Hard to enforce these
Very
days.
difficult. And look at what we have in the U.S. We used to only talk about Latinos, Mexicans, right, coming across. Now it's Central Americans that are coming across. People are coming from South America. They want to come to the country that's paved with gold, right?
But you know the end of the story. The end of the story is this is not only a global world, it is a globalizing world. And, this is not only a flat world, but it's a world that is one together. And, you and I, we don't have that many years left, but in 20, 30 years, this world is going to be all holding hands. That's the way it's going to be. And the question is, how much pain does the world suffer before it gets balanced, in the new dimension?
Well, let me tell you something regarding the European Union that is probably a hot button, not the hottest, but a hot button, and that is the inability of the common man to understand why it costs so much to run the European Union. Don't forget, the European Union is on top of every country's administration costs, on top of their diplomatic costs. The force is 25,000 people work for the European Union, and they get paid very well. And they have all of the social benefits of any country that's there, obviously. And the common man says, what is the European Union doing for us that we couldn't be doing on our own? So you're starting to see a little uprising from the common man, and we see it in countries like in Germany and in France that are paying for countries' inability to take care of themselves. Let me try to explain that a little bit.
Talk about Greece.
Oh, that's the one I was going to bring up. And it's not just Greece. It's Greece. It's Italy. There's a lot of countries that are not paying their debt back to the European Union. So if you had a friend, not a brother, but a friend, that says, "Can you lend me $100,000?" and he says, "I'm going to pay that back to you over 3 years plus interest." Well, you don't get paid the first year. You don't get paid the second year, and you don't get paid the third year. Do you want to lend him more money again? The answer is obviously no, because you don't find that he's credibly doing what is necessary to make enough money, which means in Greece and some of the other countries, they're not taxing their people enough, or they're not collecting the tax enough. I can give you all of the different pieces to the puzzle as to why these countries are not able to stand on their own. But they're not making enough of an effort to even prove to countries like Germany, where now a good percentage of their GDP is going to pay the European Union to go help these countries who are not helping themselves. That's another big issue. So Europe is starting to feel polarized from those who are giving and paying into the European Union and those who are taking and not giving back, not helping. That's become a big issue.
You know where it's going to go? I mean, Germany has a right idea. You can't keep on lending money to somebody who's not, maintaining his own house. So you have to find ways to make sure he maintains his own house. On the other hand, and this is the problem, on the other hand, if they go down, if Greece goes down, if Italy goes down, if Spain goes down, Germany's going to have to pay the price anyway. It's going to be bad for all of Europe.
It's a very similar to the situation we have with China controlling trillions of our dollars. They don't want it to go down because they know that's going to hurt them too.
Yeah.
You're right. The issue that we saw in talking to some corporate people was that it can happen. And if they allow Greece to go back to being its own country and give them a 5-year period of time to get their house in order, and then they will be welcomed back, probably seems to be the single method of how to solve the problem.
I mean, throw them out of the EU and tell them they're going to work their way back in.
Correct.
And set standards.
Correct. And the German people that I spoke to, who are very, very, they're a very strong people, and they're very proud, and they're very happy to help because they realize the benefit of having the European Union and being able to sell German products throughout those 28 countries without having to worry about duties and taxes and all that. So they're the ones who are doing extremely well by it. So they realize the benefit of having to help your friend. But there comes a point in time, and I predict it's within the next 36 months at the most, where you are going to have a revolution that says to Merkel, listen, we don't want to help them anymore. They've got to stand on their own. Maybe they can come back in again, but they have to be able to show that they're doing something about it, whether it's collecting taxes or raising taxes. Greece has the largest government in the world per capita.
That's what Hawaii did.
No, that's a state. It's 2.5 times the next country. So there's more people that work for the Greece government than any other country in the world. And those things have to change if you're going to make your house in order.
Absolutely. But this reveals another thing, and I wonder if some of the points that you thought about and talked to people about, all sort of come together on this. And in fact, we titled the show, Is the EU Falling Apart? And I'm beginning to get the sense that little things here and there suggest that it may be falling apart, or at least it's not as close as it used to be. It's not on an upswing. It's being tested. That's the lesson to me. It's being tested. These problems, these challenges, all the things we've talked about are a test of the EU. And query, how will they do under the pressure of this test?
Hold that thought. We have to take a break. This is Seymour Kazimirski with my guest, my esteemed colleague and my guest, Jay Fidell. We are at Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll be back in a minute.
Aloha, hello. My name is Hong Jiang, and I host ThinkTech Asia every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. At our show, we talk about issues that are important in Asia, such as environment, culture, history, religion. We broadcast live, and we're also on Olelo 54. Make sure to tune in, and we'll see you there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Seymour Kazimirski. Welcome back to Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. With me today is what I believe is one of the most intelligent young men here in Hawaii. And I do believe that, Jay, because you have such a well-rounded experience with everything that you do.
Thank you,
no,
Seymour.
not from that side. Jay Fidell, who's our host or our ambassador for ThinkTech Hawaii. He's done such a great job with this show. So many of you tell me you love the commentaries and you love the shows that we do. It's not just my show, there's many, many shows that appear. He takes up every single day from noon until 5 o'clock with different speakers that talk about all sorts of things. And it could be art, it could be government, it could be politics, it could be medicine. It really would behoove you to tune in every now and then to ThinkTech Hawaii shows. And they're so easy to find, not just on YouTube. The best way I found, and what I tell everybody, is go to ThinkTech Hawaii's website. It's www.thinktechhawaii.com, and look under the hosts. And under the host, you'll see my name and everybody else's name who is a host. And then scroll over to the subject matter, and you may find subject matters that interest you. I found one the other day, a matter of fact. Josh was here, Josh Green was here, and we were talking about addiction. And he was talking about what's happening here in Hawaii. And I had done a show on addiction from Vancouver with The Last Door. And Josh and I talked about it for a few minutes. And, you know, we decided that we should both maybe do a show together that addresses what to do about addiction. We know we have a problem, but now all of a sudden we have a way of maybe helping the problem here in Hawaii. So I think it's ThinkTech Hawaii is a great show. Let's get back to what this is all about. The topic today is the European Union falling apart? And it's easy to sit here in Hawaii and try to analyze it, but I just got back from 3 weeks in Europe. We worked with many, many different countries over there. We talked to a lot of people, and there is evidence, and Jay, you just brought it up before the break, that the European Union is being tested. And one of the ways that you can tell that the European Union is being tested is looking at currency and the value of currency. A month and a half ago, 6 weeks ago, the euro was at $1.36. Today, the euro, I believe, is $1.29, approaching $1.28. That's a substantial loss
in a short time,
in a very short period of time. So we have to analyze that and say, what is happening? And I think it's what you were saying. That's one of the tests. Can the euro withstand another drop going down to 120 or maybe 115 or maybe par value? What's your opinion?
Well, you know, my reaction at first is that the U.S. is lucky, because the U.S. dollar has been under this kind of, what do you want to call it, decline for a long time as the reserve currency of the world. We've had a couple of shows about that. You know, all things being equal, we suffer the risk of maybe losing our position as the holder of the reserve currency and having some other currency replace us. And I don't think it would be the Chinese yuan. I don't think that'll happen.
I agree with you.
But the second possibility, I mean, second to the American dollar, has for a long time been the euro. That the euro would replace the American dollar as a reserve currency. This drop protects the U.S. How do you like that?
No,
so
you're correct.
we come out lucky on it.
You're 100% correct. I believe that the argument about the U.S. dollar losing its value as to its position is incorrect. I feel today the U.S. dollar is stronger than ever because people around the world recognize that the Chinese yuan will never be the world currency. The euro is in trouble we just spent the last 40 minutes talking about it. The euro is in trouble. The U.S. currency is as strong as it has been. And I would love to argue that point with anybody that comes on the show or otherwise, because we go back to the sensationalism again. You know, talking about the dollar is falling and the dollar will not be the world's currency is incorrect, in my opinion.
It's all relative.
Sure.
You know, I mean, if there are factors that decline the American economy, although the market's good right now, it's good because interest rates are so low that people want to put some money in equity. But, you know, reality is that even if there are decline factors against the U.S. dollar, the test is relative. If there are greater decline factors against the euro, we're fine. And I think that's what's happened. So it's hard to argue that we're going to lose our position as the reserve currency right now. Well, we're looking pretty good.
You're right, and we're both exactly on the same page. Another issue that I think we have to look at is the perception of the U.S. in Europe. We have gone through ups and downs, a la Mr. Bush and what has happened with him. And I think the perception of what Obama is doing today is very positive in Europe. It's not as negative as we have it here. Here we get John McCain and his guys all talking about he doesn't know what he's doing. We should be, throwing a lot more money and trying to defeat ISIS and going, he didn't know what he was doing in Iraq and all that stuff. Those are all sound bites to make themselves look good and sound good and make the Republican Party stronger than they are. And I don't see it in Europe at all. Everybody I spoke to has a newfound respect for Obama because he has single-handedly gone after ISIS. He and the U.S. alone is going after a terror group that could be hitting a lot of other people very soon. So I just want you to know that Europe has a newfound respect for us. And I seem to feel the common man on the street is looking at us a lot different than the aggressor that we were in Afghanistan, not so much in Afghanistan, in Iraq, the aggressor that we were, that went in there, didn't know what we were doing and blew up everybody and left, versus the country that's going out to help the people. And that's a very important part. And that's in Europe.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the press is, often making the president into hamburger. I mean, pounding at us 24 hours a day about how he's doing this wrong and that wrong. And so, I almost feel that he's become more capable of dealing with that criticism. And he's not unresponsive to it. He's figuring out a way, to be thoughtful, but also to have to be the world's policeman. And to deal with Congress, which isn't easy because they're a bunch of Republicans in large part. So I mean, I think he's actually on the right track. He's still going to have to suffer the slings and arrows of people who would run him down no matter what. And there are people, who try to do that from day one in terms of his administration. But I think he may be actually on a better track with the American people too. But suffice to say, on your point about Europe, Europe still is in a love affair with the U.S. We showed them democracy, and we carry on today in our crazy, lurching, de Tocqueville kind of pandemonium. What did he say? Democracy is tumultuous. Well, it is, but we still do it, and it's still, aside from the cliff once in a while, it still works. And they respect that. They like that.
You got it.
They see us as the seminal place for democracy, and it's what they want to do.
I think in the last 3-4 years, Obama has done something that I don't think people here in America recognize. He really has elevated us to a platform, as you said. The European people feel that Obama's doing a good job. They feel that he's really helping out. They're starting to put behind them what George Bush did in Iraq, because they were all against that, as we know. I mean, Cameron himself is still, they're still hitting him on the head.
It's so interesting that the Europeans were more accurate in appraising the moves of George Bush than the American establishment was. We largely went along with it. God knows why. We should have seen that for what it was at the time.
Well, Jay, in business we say hindsight is 20/20, and we all look back and say, we should have, we could have. I never allow myself to do that. I want to learn from the lesson, which means I don't want to believe anymore everything I hear, what I see in the press. And I talk about that a lot when I'm doing business with people and we're analyzing business plans, for instance. And I say, do you believe everything that's in this business plan? Is that marketing pro forma really what you think it's going to be? Are they going to be able to do? And it makes us delve deeper into really what's going on. And I think it's our job, you and me and everybody else who's, what did you say, a little older before? A little bit older, to help young people analyze. Don't just make decisions on a rash statement that you read, but really analyze. We talked about that when we did the piece on the Arab-Israeli situation in Gaza, how people need to understand it's not just that picture that you see on television that really allows you to make an opinion. You've got to go back in history. You have to really look at what happened in the past to be able to understand what's happening today in the present. In Europe, what we see, or what I believe we see, is a country that is still growing. Europe as
all
the
of Europe
union.
as one country.
Yeah, it's still growing, and it's got a lot of growing pains that it has to go through.
Question, you know, in the U.S., it's inescapable that education hasn't done as well as we wanted, and that, you know, current adult education in the form of news media isn't doing as well as we wanted. My question to you is, fresh off the boat from Europe, are the Europeans, the people you've talked to, are they knowledgeable about current events in the world? Are they informed? Are their heads in the right places about understanding these sea changes? Or are they likewise uninformed?
They are more informed than we are because their press is not as sensational as we are. So they understand the bigger picture rather than the instant reaction. And everybody that I spoke to, and these are people from many, many different countries, they really are much better informed than our common man. I would say, and don't forget, our election process tells you very quickly how many people are informed by the amount of people who vote. In Europe, it's 80% who vote, 85% who vote. So something tells you, wait a second, they are much more involved than we are.
And the other thing is they sit there for half the day with a glass of really good white wine and the Herald Tribune or Figaro or something, and they read, and that gets them to a better place.
It is, that's an argument that makes me say that I want to be there for a longer period of time. You're right. Europe is, you know, in answer to the question, is the European Union falling apart? I don't think it is. I believe, for our audience, that Europe is basically growing in a different direction. It's like a young child that has to understand how far it can go in different areas. And I think we can see in Europe a microcosm of the kid. And this young European Union is going to grow, and it will do very well, even with all of the issues that we brought up today.
So interesting that it becomes our child, even though we were its child.
Yes, absolutely. Jay, thank you so much for joining me today. I don't know if I made any sense because I'm still in Austria. Yesterday I was in Vienna, and today I'm here. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful time being with you. I thank you. To all of you, I wish you all well. I'll be here next week, a little fresher, I think, and maybe a little thinner because I gained a few pounds on this trip. So I hope you'll see a difference next Tuesday. I wish you all well. I'm Seymour Kazimirski on Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii. Aloha.